How's it going, everybody? This is Dr. Todd. Welcome to another episode of the Dr. Todd podcast. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about polyamory, swinging, friends with benefits, hookup culture, and all of that. But instead of getting into is this a good thing or a bad thing, I want to take an objective look at where all of this is even coming from. If there wasn't something going on that was really motivating that behavior, then that behavior wouldn't exist. And so I think it's more helpful to really understand what that phenomenon is all about. So let's start off with some basic definitions. So the term polyamory literally means many loves. And it's actually kind of funny because it's a combination of Latin and Greek, the amory and the poly, and put together into polyamory. And this was done by Morningstar Zell in San Francisco back in the 1970s. She was the one who originally coined this term. And the whole idea is that the human heart has the capacity to love many people, and that we need to have many people in our lives in order to really satisfy that need or that desire for love. Swinging, on the other hand, is more just about sex. And swinging is all about just engaging in sexual partners, regardless if there's any love there or not. It's more just about a little bit more of a hedonistic, but just more of a sexual expression kind of thing, rather than a relational thing. And so those two things, the kind of the swinging and the polyamory, are a little bit different, and that one focuses a little bit more on the relational aspects and not necessarily the sexual aspects. In fact, there are some people who are engaged in polypods, which is kind of a family of or a group of people who are in a polyamorous relationship together, where there may be no sex at all, where it may just be it may be kind of a platonic loving relationship where that another person is integrated into the lives of the others who are involved in this poly family, but there may not be any sex involved. Where with swinging, it's all about sex, and in the middle, there's kind of a friends with benefits sort of thing where, there's some element of I want you to be a good friend of mine. I want us to have good chemistry together. This may be outside of my primary relationship, but we're going to engage in sexual play just because it's fun. That's kind of where the friends with benefits sits. It's kind of halfway in between the swinging lifestyle and polyamory. To go a little bit deeper and understand this a little bit more, we need to look at a couple of things in the human brain, right? In the human brain, we have some different circuits that are used for different things. In fact, we have many, many emotional circuits in the brain that are responsible for things like, surprise or joy or guilt, or fear or love. All of these things. These are all emotional circuits in the brain. Now, it turns out that there are three circuits in the brain that are specifically dedicated. They are hardwired for specific emotions. And one of them is fear, which is one of the reasons why fear can be such a powerful emotion, because it is one that is hardwired in the brain. The next one is what's called the rage or the anger circuit, right? And this one is also when you feel that wave of rage or you feel that wave of anger, it's almost like you can lose control because that circuit in the brain is very, very powerful because it has its own dedicated circuitry, unlike things like embarrassment, right? And the third one is the lust circuit, which is the sexual drive circuit. That has its own dedicated circuitry in the brain that is independent. I mean, not every structure in that circuit is independent of all of the others, but it has its own dedicated circuitry in the brain, which makes that drive for sex one of the things that is hardwired in the brain. And those three dedicated circuits in the brain are hardwired for a very specific reason, and it has to do with survival. If we did not have good fear circuits, we wouldn't survive very long because we wouldn't be able to respond to things that were threatening. We wouldn't be able to recognize threat. The rage circuit or the anger circuit is all about protection, right? It is all about pushing back on something that is a threat. This is why animals will protect their babies, right? That rage circuit takes over and they will fight, because they're trying to keep themselves, their families, their offspring or whatever protected from some kind of perceived threat. And that third one about sex, if it wasn't for sex, we wouldn't be here, right? I mean, sex is integral to what we are as human beings, every bit as integral as fear, as anger, as love, as any of those other experiences that we have in life, right? And in fact, our physiology is really designed to respond to all three of those, right? We are very, very sexual creatures. We're sexual in how we think about ourselves. We're sexual in how we present ourselves. We're sexual in who we're attracted to. We're sexual in the kind of the sexual drive for sexual gratification. And our bodies are also designed to deal with threats, right? I mean, that's why we have adrenaline. That's why, our blood flow within our body can change when we are under threat as a way of trying to survive something that could otherwise harm or kill us. And so on one hand, we have this drive for procreation, right? This drive to engage in sex that's just a circuit that is hardwired in the brain. And in absence of activation of that fear or that outrage circuit, it's like if those two things are shut down, the one circuit that tends to be on all the time is that lust circuit, is that desire circuit. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're horny all the time, right? But there's always a scanning of the environment and looking for attractive people and kind of getting all fluttery when somebody really attractive is talking to us and things like that, right? That's one of the ways in which that circuit kind of affects how we think and show up in the world. Now, there's another piece that is very core to human beings, which is the attachment piece, right? The great psychologist Sue Johnson, who was the founder of emotionally focused couple therapy, who I think is just absolutely the bomb. She has a ton of books out, Love Sense, Hold Me Tight. They're well worth reading because when it comes to relationships and maintaining that attachment bond, Sue Johnson was really the pioneer. And one of the things that we know about human bonding and human attachment and the need for us to be in relation and have emotional bonds with others is that our brains are also wired for that connection, right? We are wired to have that sense of bonding with one or a very small group of people. So parents, siblings, loved ones, our partners, right? And those attachment bonds do a number of things for us, right? They not only just help us feel connected and not alone, but those attachment bonds themselves actually help create our sense of self and shape how we feel about ourselves and our understanding of our place in the world and all of those kinds of things, right? So this ability to bond and this need to emotionally bond with other humans is also something that is hardwired within us. And this combination of these two circuits, right, this attachment circuit and this circuit for sexual desire, where one is targeted more towards a single person like our life partner, and the other is much less specific towards a particular person, can create some tension in a relationship, right? Because there's this simultaneous desire to be connected and to bond and be a good partner and to love our partner. And at the same time, there are these circuits in our brain that are making us look around and making us like wonder, boy, what would it be like with them and all of this. But the reality is that our hearts are wired for one person, but our sexual desire is not. And so what do we do about that, right? Well, we can pretend that doesn't exist, right? We can just pretend that, oh no, once my heart is here, that's where all my sexual desire is. And we have what we see now, and that is people will just cheat, right? Because any natural desire that does not have a healthy outlet will find an unhealthy one, right? And with all the negative stuff that happens to people when they engage in sex outside of a committed relationship, you would think that, there must be something wrong with them for them to engage in that, given all of the consequences that happen if you're caught engaging in having sex with somebody outside of your relationship. And so there are a number of people who were kind of like, well, wait a minute here. Can we do both, right? Can we do both? Is there a way that we could still have a tightly bonded relationship where we are connected, we are there for each other, we are a close, loving couple who also have arranged our relationship in a way that allows the space for some sexual exploration of each partner? That's essentially what is happening on the swinging side of things. People are like, I love you and I want to be with you. I find you sexy. I love having sex with you, but I also feel this other desire, and I see these other men or other women, and there's this real desire there. And what do I do with that? One of the myths out there that I think is important to just kind of dispel is that just because couples choose to engage in sexual activity with people outside of the relationship, and that is part of their relationship agreement, and they communicate about that, that is not necessarily an indication that something is wrong with their bonding. It just isn't. I've worked with many, many, many couples who have been kind of both on the poly side and on the swinging side, and they're by and large no different. At least on the swinging side, they're by and large no different than other couples. In fact, the necessity for communicating in order to navigate through a consensually non-monogamous relationship is oftentimes a pressure that forces them to have to be much more vulnerable, much more open, much more communicative, much more checking in with each other. How you doing? What do you think about this? What's going on? Blah 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 blah. And it's hard to have good numbers on this, but my general sense from having worked with this community for quite some time is that in about 2/3 of the cases, it tends to create more cohesion in the relationship and just creates this extra element of kind of sexual play and sexual fun. And then on the polyamorous side, which is a form of also consensual non-monogamy, which kind of encompasses all of this stuff. As a couple therapist, if we're really looking at this whole consensual non-monogamy thing and looking at what are really the forces involved here, right? I mean, there's this simultaneous desire for a close emotional bond with another. I mean, that is hardwired within us, I mean, as Sue Johnson said, we're not even Homo sapiens, right? The one who thinks. We're homo vinculum, the one who bonds, right? I mean, that bonding is so critical to who we are and our health and wellness and all of that, that when we can't bond, when we don't have that sense of deep, intimate connection with another person, it really affects us in a big way. And then on the other hand, you've got this sexual desire piece. We've got this circuit in our brain that is, constantly just, we're looking for sexual opportunity. We're looking for sexual opportunity. And when somebody pays attention and we see somebody attractive and we start engaging, and it doesn't matter if you're male or female, right? Because both cheat at the same rate, right? I mean, it's like men and women are both equally as sexually active, even though oftentimes, at least historically, women have been a little bit more coy about showing that, expressing that openly. That's changing with the younger generations, where women are much more open about their sexual desires and things like that. But the bottom line of all of this, right, has to do with what is going to be your relationship agreement with your partner. Many people will say, you know what, for religious reasons, philosophical reasons, kind of family tradition, or each of our own sensitivities around abandonment or feeling unsafe or whatever it is, we may choose to be strictly sexually monogamous. And that is great. That is fantastic. The conversation, if you choose to do that, the conversation really needs to be, when I have these desires, right? When I see somebody who's attractive or I feel sexually drawn to somebody, what do we do with that, right? What do we do with that? Because if it can't be communicated in some way, and that has to all of a sudden become the thing that I hold secret, or the thing that you hold secret because I don't want to hear about it, then that will start to become a wedge that can eventually grow into an infidelity, particularly if the relationship is going through a period of crisis. Another approach would be, which is also valid, is like, you know what, you and I love each other very much. I know that both you and I have talked about, our interest in being sexual with somebody else, and how do we navigate that? What do we do? What do we do with that? How do we dip our toe into this if it's something that we want to explore? And if we try it and one of us doesn't really like it, then how do we navigate back, right? And just have that conversation. And that is okay too. I hope you found this conversation enlightening. And again, I think it's important just to understand what is happening and what's going on, and not necessarily judge it or judge the people who, choose to be strictly monogamous, or people who, want to be what's called ethically non-monogamous or consensually non-monogamous in some way, and allow room for their sexuality to get some expression. And this is also particularly true with somebody who is bisexual, right? Who has desire for both same sex and and opposite sex partners, right? I mean, how does that get some expression within the relationship? And it's all about communication. It's all about agreement. It's all about what is right for us, what is right for our situation, what is right for our goals going forward, and how do we know if this is working for us if we choose to do it, and how do we know that it's working for us if we choose to not do it? And either way is fine. So the last thing that I'll say is that we need to take off our judgment glasses when it comes to sexual expression and emotional bonding. Those are two different systems, and all of us, rather than judging ourselves of what does this mean about me that I'm in this loving relationship and I still have these feelings and these desires, does this mean that I suck as a human? Does this mean that I suck as a partner? And it's like, no, not necessarily. How you navigate through those things makes all the difference in the world. If you can communicate and there is a partnership, a collaboration with your partner about what to do, then that's totally cool. But to betray trust, to engage in infidelity can be horribly harming to that emotional bond and will oftentimes lead to the end of the relationship. So I hope you found this conversation helpful. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya.